What's up, everyone? Welcome to Bilbrons and Dragons. I'm your host, Bilbron DaoLockStone. So today we're having another battle report for my Molebron DaoLockStone build, which I have been playing in a Westmarch server called the Forged Concordance, and I am having an awfully good time there, so I highly recommend it. I put all of the relevant information in the video description below, so feel free to join me there and we can adventure together. So today's adventure was called With the Night, which was a one-shot run by DM Gordon, and this is my third game with Gordon, so I knew it was going to be good, and he didn't disappoint. Really cool storyline, and of course he had great descriptions and all of that, and the battles were very good, very well tuned. This was my most dangerous mission, I think, by far, and it was only a successful mission because I was also with my very best team, I think. These were really well-constructed PCs, really strong players. Very impressed by the players, really great role play, and so we basically made it through, and it was awesome. It was my longest session by far, 7.5 hours, so this might be a long video, I don't know. In any case, I should probably talk about my character a little bit first. I'll put my 4th level stats on the screen because this is my first adventure as a 4th level PC, and we can see that I have added Inspiring Leader, Protection from Good and Evil, Invisibility, and I dropped Agonizing Blast to add Devil Sight. And so this is all part of my deviation from the video build, where I went with Pact of the Tome, and I might still switch to Pact of the Tome later, but for now I went with Pact of the Chain so I could get my summoning playstyle online more quickly, and so I'm building around that. And that's why I added Inspiring Leader, because adding what's currently a 7 hit point buff of temporary hit points to my familiar is awesome. And of course, stacking it onto basically everybody else in the party and their familiars is also awesome. So I'm really happy I added it, and it really played out well in this adventure where it was pretty deadly. And so having those temporary hit points really mattered. And then I added Invisibility, which is awesome. That makes me a lot sneakier, and now my familiar isn't the only one that can turn invisible. I decided to add Protection from Good and Evil because that's a touch spell, and that's a nice buff that I can drop onto Fargar from distance through that little familiar thing that they have. And then I dropped Agonizing Blast and added Devil Sight because at level 4 I'm not going to be using much Eldritch Blast. I'm not going to be needing Agonizing, it's just my backup, and I'm mostly going to be operating through my familiar, whereas I don't have Dark Vision, and I cast Darkness a lot, and that uses my concentration a lot, so Devil Sight makes a lot of sense here. Now next level I will be bringing Agonizing back, because my Eldritch Blast goes up to 2 beams, and that's just too much damage to ignore. It'll probably not just be a backup. I'll try and implement it as much as possible, and stop operating through my familiar so much, and at that point I may drop Devil Sight, maybe to add Eldritch Mind, maybe not. I haven't made that decision yet. But that's basically where I'm at as a character, and I was very excited to go into this adventure with this whole new skill set. So this adventure started as it often does, with Bilbron approaching the job board, but this time he didn't get there first. And as he was approaching, he saw a little goblin with an iron badge mission in his hand running in the other direction. So I'm like, hey, wait a minute. Is that an iron mission you got in your hand there, bro? I'm looking for a gig. I'm useful. I can be on a team. And he was like, what? Who are you? His name turned out to be Idic, and he was a Meridlock, so another genie warlock, and pretty small even for goblins. I think like 2.5 feet tall, something like that, so super tiny. And he quizzed me actually on my skill set, and it turns out the job was in Tears Fall to remove curses, and I was like, well, I don't do well in the remove curse department, but I know Tears Fall. I have a kind of connection there, and I solved a mystery there. And he's like, oh, I solved a mystery there too. So he's like, all right, great, you're on the team. And it turns out I had interrupted him from approaching his friend that he wanted to recruit to the team, named Saratha Oakley, who was an elderly halfling, literally pretty aged and wrinkled, who was a ghostwise halfling, a star druid. And she had a great shtick going. I really liked her role play, and she was, as we see, a super effective member of the team, and so they had previously adventured together. I had never met either of them, and so she was on the team, And then finally we were looking around for one more guy, and we couldn't find any more iron badges, but we did see a steel, and we decided that maybe he would come with us. And so Idic went and approached Titian, who was a Tortle blade singer, which was super cool. This guy was level 6, so he had extra attack, so he was dropping, the extra attack movement blade thing, and had really great skinning. Oh my god, his skinning cracked me up. So yeah, he was willing to come with us, and this was the team, 4 guys, and as I said, it turned out to be a really strong team, well put together, and the players were strong, and so we performed well, which we needed to, because I think it was a pretty tough mission. So we decided to head out to Tears Fall. It's not too far, as you can see by the map. We just hitched a ride on an outgoing caravan, and just promised some protection if things went bad. And on the intervening trip, I told them my story about the casino ship and how it went bad, and how I've thought about it over and over and over at night, and I'll never let that happen again. I know exactly what to do. I can totally recover the bodies if anybody else dies, as long as I survive, which I probably will, because that's just how I roll. And by the end of it, they were all inspired, and I gave my first 10-minute speech as an inspiring leader, and I gifted everyone with 7 hit points. It's your level plus charisma, so currently 7, but it does scale with level and with your stat increases. And so about halfway, we encountered a bunch of people fleeing from Tears Fall precisely because of this curse thing. And so we talked to them and got kind of a basic sense of what was going on. It seemed like there were ghosts of fey creatures like bears and wolves and like fairies and even a unicorn that were cursing people and making them super sick, and then they would eventually die. And so they were fleeing. And then the caravan that we were on, we're like, we don't want no part of that. We're just going to go back this other direction. We got some business at some other city to the north. And so we were like, okay, I guess we'll just walk the rest of the way. And so we did, and we made it to Tears Fall, and we met our client, Vigilant Prest, who was a high-ranking town guardsman, and he was really sick, and he was trying to train with and give some orders to some of his flunkies when we arrived. And he greeted us and gave us the skinny, which was basically what the villagers had already told us, but some more detailed information, specifically one that the guardsmen had actually engaged some of the ghosts, and they did actually receive physical damage, not just curses. And it was mostly cold damage, whereas the citizens were mostly afflicted by curses, which seemed to be keyed to these ghosts like looking at you, and then their eyes would like flash, and then you'd be cursed, and then you'd be screwed. And that was basically what was happening, and he himself had gotten caught up in all of this, and that's why he was so super sick. And then he also mentioned that all of the ghosts were of fey creatures, but there was one humanoid, and it was of a woman who had died in this town 20 years ago, named Yana, and she had died in this. She was like apparently a bad person and had tried to create a pact with an evil patron. She was like a warlock. This patron being Bashaba, the goddess of misfortune. And so she had died in this crazy ritual and then cursed the town. And this was 20 years ago, but for some reason now the curse is like coming to fruition or something. I mean, that's their conjecture because, like I said, they saw her and she was the only humanoid. So he then connected us with the magistrate. So we went up and talked to the magistrate with this information that he had given us. And she turned out to be a pretty cute priestess of Tyr. And she gave us more information about the background of the woman, saying that she lived in this particular area of town, and that happened to be the area of town that was being afflicted by the ghosts. The ghosts were pretty regular. They always showed up at about an hour after sunset. And she also knew the location of the ritual that the woman had died at, so, her place of death. And that turned out to actually be out in the forest at some temple. And so that was pretty much the, actionable intel that we could get from them. So we decided to investigate. So first we went to the area of town where where Yana had lived, and where the ghosts were afflicting. And it was in the middle of the day, so we had like 8 hours until it was time for them to normally appear. So we figured we had plenty of time to do some detective work and check out the scene. And it honestly turns out like we're not the best detectives. We did our best. There was like some fungal growth all over the place, and I set my imp down like this hole into the sewers, and we were like checking out connections between the houses and the wharf, because it was like on this wharf area. And there were like a bunch of sick people that were kind of like huddled up in their homes, and we didn't really talk to too many of them. A better detective might have, but we didn't. And we did talk to a couple though, and got some more intel about this woman and maybe her family members. But it turns out she didn't really have any remaining family members. We were working on a theory that maybe one of her family members was reaching out 20 years later to extract revenge on behalf of poor Grandma Yana or whatever. And so, yeah, we didn't really turn up with much, and we would have kept looking, except at that point we got attacked by ghosts. Even though it was in the middle of the day, this spooky fog rolled in, and the sky darkened, and then we couldn't see anything above 10 feet, which mattered because me and Idik both had chain-packed familiars that obviously operate pretty well up in the air. And then like a dozen ghosts appeared at the edge, surrounding that neighborhood, and just started closing in. And at first the battle seemed to be going okay. I mean, we killed one or two of them, but they were pretty tough, and they just kept closing in, and they actually had this weird curse effect. And so Bilbron was like bouncing around. I even Misty stepped at one point trying to avoid these things. And I still had to make 2 Constitution saving throws against this curse, and thank God I made them, because I'm sure I wouldn't have liked the result otherwise. And in the meantime, Titian and Saratha are laying waste to their opponents that get close to them, and me and Idik are like magic stoning people from really far away. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that I added magic stone to this character as well. That gives me an option for magic bludgeoning damage. And so that's a different look from force damage, and it's I can do it for my imp and get 2 per round with the timing, and they're good against skeletons, which take double damage against bludgeoning, and yada yada yada. So we won that battle, and then decided, okay, we must be scaring whoever it is, and so we decided to go check out the forest. We could have should have investigated like that area more, but we didn't. And it turned out to not be necessary anyway, but a better detective would have found out more there probably. So we decided to head into the forest, where we had heard that this woman had died at some sort of temple. That was basically all we had to go on. And that we had the general location. So we went through, it was only about an hour trip, and we definitely noticed that there seemed something weird. I put pictures up and you can see the forest just looks horrible. Definitely some kind of affliction and curse and perversion of nature going on here. Which Saratha's a druid, remember, star druid, so she was getting pretty upset by all of this. And so we finally got to an area that we thought was right around where the temple was supposed to be, and it turns out there was this massive, gorgeous waterfall, and there was a flying snake with these rainbow-colored wings fluttering around, and it seemed like it was guarding something. Now, at this point, it was just Saratha and Titian who were visible, because both Idik and I had retreated into our rings because we felt like we might have been pressed for time a little bit, and we both wanted a short rest. And so we decided to take that short rest while the others were traveling. And so we were in the rings to start this encounter. And so we were letting them talk, and it honestly just didn't seem to be going anywhere. I mean, this was like a really loopy, IQ 75 type of, it was a snake. Right, so our expectations might not be too high, but it really wasn't giving us much intel. It just basically seemed like it was guarding something. It was guarding its ancestors. It did mention that there was bad warlocks and stuff, but we'd already known that this woman was in a warlock ritual, so we thought maybe that it was her relative or something, and could have been warlock related. And then it wasn't going anywhere, and at one point Idik popped out of his ring, which was being carried by his familiar. He was invisible, and immediately the snake freaked and was like, "Oh, a warlock, another bad warlock." That's when we learned that it was scared of bad warlocks, and that maybe warlocks were involved. And he called his ring the Talisman. So I didn't actually put it together at that moment, but looking back at it, it seemed clear that the warlock involved was probably Pact of the Talisman. And I was even at one point thinking, God, is it Pact of the Chain? Pact of the Blade? What can we expect here? And literally the snake had just said Talisman. But I didn't put that together until a little bit later. And so we couldn't get anywhere with dialogue. Idic tried, and I honestly was in my ring, and I didn't see any point of coming out because I didn't really see or think of anything to say that these other guys weren't saying. And I just felt safer in there. Why come out? And I can only go in there once a day. So once I come out, that was it. And so things went aggro, and we ended up attacking the snake. And I actually tried to position Fargar right next to it invisibly, but it turns out the snake had blind sight, so that kind of ruined our whole approach, which was lame. And it was a pretty tough battle. Saratha even went down to 0, and there was still like a few enemies around, so it was a worrisome moment. But she had made like a gajillion goodberries beforehand, because we actually had to travel a couple of days, and when you're doing that, goodberry is so good because it's got that 24-hour duration. So you get your slots back, and you have like 60 goodberries or something. She gave 15 of them to everybody. And so we managed to win that battle, and then a whole bunch of goodberries later, Saratha was back into fighting shape. And then we explored the waterfall area, and my Fargar I turned into a Quasit because these things were doing cold damage, and he had the worst investigation, and he couldn't find Jack. But luckily, Idic's familiar Spot was coming through clutch with just amazing investigation rolls, and found a couple of caverns within the waterfall. So we penetrated the first one, and there wasn't really anything back there. And then we went over into the second one, and that seemed to be the temple. It looked like a temple, kind of, and there was this like pool with a makeshift crude altar at the middle of it, and there was like bloody garments and stuff there. And then we found the corpse of a unicorn in the pool, which infuriated Saratha, and she was just literally like frothing at the mouth about like, oh my God, how dare they, and just like really, really intensely wanting to punish and take revenge on whoever did it. And that seemed to maybe like spark a reaction, and these ghosts came out, 6 of them, but they weren't aggro. And Saratha just was like a superstar here, because she was a ghost-wise halfling, which I guess their specialty is talking to ghosts or something. So she was just like super expert at talking to these ghosts, and had like great interactions with them, and got them to answer questions. And we discovered that, there was a warlock behind it all, and he actually resided in the town, and we could follow his footsteps back to the town. And we could identify him by the fact that he had an amulet of Bashaba on his neck. And then at this point, Saratha remembered the description of this guy, a vigilant press at the beginning, as having a chain around his neck. And so she just had this intuitive leap that like, oh my God, maybe it's vigilant pressed, because I think I see that he had a medallion or something on. I saw a chain around. And then that just kind of, it also turns out that we knew that Press lived in that area where the ghosts were. So we were all thinking it was where Yana lived, but maybe it was Press. And so just on her intuitive leap, and the fact that she was still like getting answers to direct questions from these ghosts, we got she directly asked, is it him? And they said yes. So boom, mystery solved. And so that was really impressive. And we went back basically knowing that we were going to have to arrest this guy, and we went to the magistrate and presented our evidence and explained what happened, and said that we could prove it by the fact that he's going to have this necklace of Bashaba on his neck, and Bashaba is a well-known evil goddess of misfortune. But she basically, the magistrate, confirmed our suspicions right away, because she said, oh my God, that would totally explain why he's acting so weird, because this morning he went down to the local prison, and he kicked everyone out, and he turned away these deliveries, and he brought in like 6 guards, and then he locked the place down, and nobody knows why. And we were like, he probably is preparing for us to come, arrest him. And she was like, yeah, please do arrest him by any means necessary. And we were like, yeah, no worries, any means necessary. And so, we decided to take the assault to Vigilant Press, who had holed up in the jail. And the jail was a pretty difficult place to get into. It had a small entrance at the top, only one way in or out. The top level was trapped, and then it was like a lot bigger underneath, as sometimes prisons tend to be. So after some debate about whether we should go in and try to, show our credentials and convince guards that, hey, they should abandon Prest, which I argued against because I thought, well, if he's a cult leader, he's going to surround himself with cult members. And so it's very low odds that they're being roped into this. And if we, pretend that they might be good guys, they might get the drop on us. They might be able to surprise us in some way. Whereas if we go in hot, we can take advantage of having the element of surprise. And so nobody really seemed to like that, because I guess I'm the only evil dude. And there's a general sentiment of it. Let's not murder hobo our way through this. But they went up and engaged, and just like the very initial engagement, clued them into, Titian and Saratha, who were the ones that were, handling point on this, clued them in that they knew what was up. They were expecting us. They were told about us, because they were whispered like, oh, is that them? Is that them? Get ready. And so they went back and they're like, yeah, they're hostile and they're expecting us. And so we decided to go in hot. And this was a pretty difficult battle. I wasn't expecting it to be so tough. It was 3 of these guys, and they turned out to all be warlock, like little warlock cronies, and fairly capable, because both Idik and I led with our familiars. And if you've been following me, familiars are amazing when they're chainlock familiars. And first Idik Spot got blown away, and then Fargar got blown away, each by 2 shatter spells, which is tough, man. Thunder damage, it doesn't hit any of our resistances, and we both used our reaction to cut one of the damage in half, but then we didn't have anything left for the next shatter. And so both of our familiars got blown away, and, I don't know about Idik, but for me, that's like most of my offense, and I was like, oh, that's not good. And, it was a tough battle, but we did manage to prevail, and no one else got hurt except our familiars. And that's honestly fine, because if we're talking about 4 shatters, I would much rather my familiar eat that rather than me. I'm sorry, Fargar, but better you than me, buddy. And so that was 3 of them, and we knew there was 6 total plus Press. So we was like, all right, there's 1 plus 3. And now that our familiars had died, we didn't have anybody to do any invisible scouting for us. And so I was the only one who could cast invisible. So I went down invisible, and Idik cast darkness on a stone, so I had a stone of darkness in my pocket, and I was invisible. And I went down to check it out. And as soon as I went down to the lower level, I saw that Prest and Flunky were at the end of a corridor scribing some kind of ritual circle into the ground. No idea what, but obviously something bad. And then I went up close to check on them, and I noticed that the other 3 were set up in ambush positions, ready to get the jump on us when we came through. So I went back, told people, or told the team, and we decided to rush in there, even though those guys were in ambush position, because we didn't want them to finish that ritual. And I was like, okay, fine, that makes sense. Even though I'm literally feeling naked here without Fargar to help me, and feeling pretty vulnerable with only a 14 AC, even with darkness up, because these guys are casting Shatter and have been pretty formidable so far. And then, of course, they have their whole ringleader, who's got to be the most formidable, right? But yeah, so I was right out there blocking sight with a darkness spell, and then Idik threw down Eldritch Blast to start, and then it literally didn't even affect this guy at all. It just bounced off his armor. Apparently he had some kind of protection against force damage, which is not a good thing when you're a warlock, especially when force damage is your plan B and your plan A has already been blown up by shatters. And so I was like, oh my god, what am I going to do? So it's like Idik went first, and then I went next. And so on my turn, I decided just to hit him with an Eldritch Blast, because literally I had nothing else. He was too far away for a magic stone. And I figured I would at least get the bludgeoning damage on him, from Genie's Wrath, which is 2. But then I said to the other, and this is so ironic because I was arguing against this earlier, but then I said, we're only here for Prest. Anyone who surrenders and flees gets to see their families tonight. And so DM Gordon said, okay, roll intimidation at disadvantage. And as we can see, boop, I rolled epically. And so, surprisingly, all 3 of his flunky warlocks threw down their weapons and ran out of the room. And I was like, I'll call that a turn. Very surprised because, again, I was super worried. I was hanging out there completely vulnerable, just a darkness to protect me, which would have gone down pretty quickly once I started taking damage. And these guys were casting Shatter, an area of effect spells, and, they might have had Devil Sight themselves, being warlocks. I was really super worried, and so for them to just run out of the room was such a huge relief. Again, guys, man, that role-playing interactions thing, it can come in clutch sometimes. And I totally wasn't even expecting it. I said that as kind of like a role-playing thing, completely not expecting these guys to run like that, because I expected them to be these dedicated cult members. So now, I felt bad. Maybe we could have done that up on the top. But then I was evil, so I didn't feel too bad. But you know what I mean. So then Prest himself stopped doing this ritual thing and ran deeper into the prison complex. The others had run out of the prison complex, and obviously we didn't stop them. But Prest ran deeper into the complex, and then we couldn't find him. And so we were looking all around, like trying to find Invisible and all of that, and it wasn't working. And so we split up a little bit, and Idik was kind of investigating the front, and I was investigating like the southern portion, and Titian and Saratha were up at the northeast side dealing with prisoners, and they were interrogating these prisoners that were actually in cells, because remember, this is a prison complex. And Saratha was doing it very intelligently and aggressively by questioning them, and then afterwards like making them stick their arms through the bars, and then was like securing them to the bars so they were all tied up. And this flushed out Vigilant Prest, who had disguised himself as a prisoner, but he couldn't let himself get tied up, so he went aggro, dropped his disguise, and attacked Titian and Saratha. And me and Idik were like way too far away. We ran there as fast as we could, but I basically just got line of sight so I could see what was happening, and I couldn't really affect anything, which was fine because Titian and Saratha annihilated this guy. Most of it coming from Saratha's summoned land beast, which she had made take the shape of a tiny little corgi, and this thing like hit double criticals on Prest, and so it just like literally tore him apart, and at the end did this amazing like jump off the knee, rip out the throat thing. And that was it for our boy Vigilant Prest. We searched the body, didn't really find much. It seems like most of his like powers and defenses were coming from runes and stuff. But the ghost of Yana did make an appearance, and she gifted Saratha with something that turned out to be an orb of shielding, and she had a very satisfied look on her face, and then she faded away. So we had a pretty good feeling that we did the right thing and maybe lifted the curse. And then shortly afterwards, as we were searching the place, the magistrate rolled up with some more town guards and confirmed that yes, the curse had been lifted, and all of the citizens that were afflicted with it now feel fine, and well done, we did a great job. And then at the end of it, she basically threw herself at me, things got a little flirty, and that's how Bilbron remembers it. Maybe the way that it actually went down was that I tried to flirt with her, and then I made a roll, and it wasn't that great, but then I used inspiration and rolled again, and I got a 15, so I'm still in the the ballpark. And so kind of sort of arranged a date with her for my next time in Tears Fall, which I'm sure is going to be here very soon. And I should mention, this whole time, I honestly thought there were going to be sea hags involved. At first, my gut instinct was that there were going to be sea hags involved. And then at one point, the DM mentioned, because I'd asked about it, this curse couldn't be the work of one hag, but it could be a coven of hags, I guess. Because I mentioned, the sea hag I killed was trying to summon a coven. Could a coven of hags maybe do this? And so I was totally expecting sea hags to be the big bad at the end of this, all the way up to like 90% of it. It didn't work out that way, so that's like the first time my gut instinct has been wrong against sea creatures. So I did want to log that for official record. So Bilbron's views and perspectives are evolving all the time based on his experiences. Because like right now he thinks he's the horse whisperer because he got that epic series of rolls when breaking horses. I'm sure that's probably going to work against him someday. So yeah, that was the adventure. It was 7.5 hours. It was pretty long, but super fun. Had a great time with all the role play. As I said, it was a great team, not just from the tactical perspective, not just from the character build perspective, but also from the role playing perspective. And Gordon helped out, gave us the room to do that, gave us the framework with a pretty cool story. And so for a one-shot, I had a lot of fun. We got 265 gold, which is quite a hefty payout for an iron mission, and a couple of magic items. So it was all cool. In any case, thank you so much for watching. This has been Bilbrons and Dragons. I'm your host, Bilbron DaoLockStone. See you next time.